Sea cucumber's not so cute, bro.
But if you kiss it, you get 7 years.
It's more sexy.
Sea cucumbers, they barf out their guts. Alright.
I feel like that 7 years of good luck thing is just a prank people pull on little kids when they kiss sea cucumbers.
I thought I was talking, sorry. When someone said kissing the sea cucumber, the wheels fell off, so I'll make sure we don't say that again. One of the things that I'd like to identify as a pattern in this class are the causes of extinction. This is all, rather than try to use the book for this unit, I've put together about 90% of the content into one slideshow. That's today. So one thing I want to talk about is causes of extinction, which is very often on the college boards. I want to remind you, first of all, that extinction is perfectly natural, completely normal, and it happens all the time. You know, like people die of natural causes, species die of natural causes. And whether those be individual extinctions, like a regular part of natural selection, or whether they die as part of these like major bursts of extinction, which we call mass extinctions. These are actually the way that life and death have happened over and over and over in the history of our species. You may want to know that about 99.5% of all the species in the history of life are already extinct. Extinction is not new. You don't blame Whitey. If you could please look up, on this side, above the map wall, there have been 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 mass extinctions in the history of life. You may have heard that there was once an age of the dinosaurs. And everybody knows, right, that after the age of the dinosaurs came the mammals.
Humans. Right away.
Most recently including the humans, yep. First there was life in the seas, then life moved off the land, then life took flight into the air. Life got really big, life got a lot smaller. There's these changes over time. So don't let yourself say that extinction is somehow unnatural because it's natural, or that it's necessarily tragic because it's also the opening into which other cool stuff will move. Anybody have a species that was going extinct for natural causes? What was yours? Yeah, that was already what we call a relic species. They were already sort of rare. Yeah?
I think it's a mirror leopard of Korea and Asian area. It's very rare to be in that.
Amur, right?
Yeah.
A-M-U-R? Yeah.
No, I was not.
And there's a really famous example. The California condor was doomed. Because the California condor relies on a food source that has been shrinking for about 15,000 years. Anybody been to La Brea Tar Pits? You've got to go. It's right next to a killer art museum and right up the street from like the epicenter of Ethiopian food and outside of Ethiopia. Like seriously, Ethiopian food, like they give you this huge tray with like spongy soft bread that's really spongy. And then all the ingredients that you order are like blended in little bowls with like oil and salt. So when it's like the chicken, you eat like chicken slop with your bread. And then it's like eggplant. It's like, you know, like a lot of Indian food. It's kind of like soupy and like really flavor rich. And you don't use utensils. There's no utensils. You just like tear off bread. And Oh man, it's cheap.
That's it.
I'm telling you, you can take the bus. The bus drops you off at the corner. Seriously, make a little field trip. Go to Liberia Tar Pits, catch an art museum, eat at the Ethiopian restaurants, come home and enjoy the sunset on the left side of the bus. I'm telling you.
Wait, wouldn't that be the
Me.
extended bus?
Hear me. The California condor, if you go to Liberia Tar Pits, you'll notice, was really common at a time when big mammals were really common. North America used to have tons of like big cats and sloths and big wolves and all these cool big mammals, most of which went extinct after the end of the previous ice age. And so the California condor was doomed before our lead ammunition and electrical cables. They were already like tanking. So they were on the edge. They were at a genetic risk already. And then humans have pushed them much closer to the brink. That happens sometimes. We call it the base level extinction rate or the background extinction rate. Those natural causes are about 2 species a year as a long-term global average. Remember I said long-term and remember I said global. So for natural causes, a couple of plant, insect, fish, reptile species, whatever, per year. But then there's us. And humans do it better. We take extinction to the next level. I'll bet you that I can give you the primary cause of extinction in this room. And remember, you all picked your endangered species without me. I told you where to find the list, and you chose. Your freedom of choice is expressed by the giant bias toward mammals, which is not accurate as a representation of what's actually endangered. You chose on your own what you would research. And check this out. Please raise your hand, and not like this, but please raise your hand for real if your species is endangered by habitat loss, degradation, or fragmentation. Way up high. Come on, all the way up. All the way up, and now look around. Primary cause. Okay, include secondary causes. That's about 80-90% of the class. That's almost everybody. 3 or 4 kids definitely have their hand down. When you look at the picture of the blue and white planet, remember that humans are truly a scourge on this earth. I mean, we are beautiful. We make music and art, and we shoot that stuff into space on satellites. Great and amazing and wonderful things about our species. Can't say enough. I'm in love with a human. I've even made a couple of humans. So it's not like I hate humans. No, don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong. I like the humans. But let's remember that humanity is not free. We have either developed, or farmed, or logged, or burned, or fished, or polluted almost every square inch of this planet. I mean, think about it. Like, where do you have to go on that map where you cannot tell that there are humans on the planet? Maybe, but there's trash down there. I mean, maybe Mongolia. The bottom of a canyon, maybe, you wouldn't notice, unless planes fly over. But then you would notice. Antarctica, maybe. Himalayas maybe, but the Himalayas are melting, and so is Antarctica. Maybe you wouldn't notice that though. Like, yeah. Yeah, you know, there's a couple places. But like, okay, that's enough. Stop. Hold on. Everybody's like, woo, I got one. Okay, stop. My point is, literally, if you're looking across the landscape, you will see the mark of man everywhere. We have impacted all habitat. And there's a really, really neat, surprising, and counterintuitive principle about the relationship between number of species and habitat availability. It's called the species area effect. That'll be up there all day. I mean, not all day. It'll be up there like 15 minutes. So don't rush to copy. I do want you to catch a few parts of this conversation. Make sure that you get this. I swear it's one of the more difficult things to explain in the entire class. So please look up. It's called the species area effect, and don't worry, this will stay on the whiteboard. It's on the screen. The horizontal axis is the percentage of habitat which has been lost, from 0 lost to 100 lost, and the vertical axis is the percentage of species that are left from 0% to 100%. So, please look up. When you've lost 1% of your habitat, you have roughly 100% of your species. And when you've lost 99% of your habitat, you have roughly 1% of your species. And remember, we're talking about species, not individuals. So I don't mean the number of cows, I mean the cow species. These aren't individuals, these are species as a whole. I think you understand that if we have all our habitat, we'll have all our species, and if we've lost all of our habitat, we will have lost all of our species. The corners are obvious. Aren't the corners obvious? I mean, it's straightforward, right? Give me quiet, people. But here comes one of the interesting things about this. It's not a straight line. You see that red line, the dashed line, this one? That would be the direct relationship, but there is not a direct relationship. It's not a straight line. For example, a lot of you might think, please look up, you know, we've lost half of the habitat, so that probably means we've lost half the species. That's what the red line would say. Do we agree with that? That's the direct relationship? But that's not true. When you lose half of your habitat, you do not lose half of your species. The actual relationship is that curvy line. If this said the number of individuals, the red line would probably be accurate, right? Because you give up half the land, you've lost half the living stuff, right? So individuals would be the red line, right? Let me say that again. If we cut down half the forest, we've lost half the stuff that was alive in the forest. If we lose half the kelp beds, there goes half the animals that live in kelp beds. But species do not follow that direct line. Can anybody tell me why losing half the kelp forest is not going to take away half the species?
Is that because one of the reproducing and also don't they can't they just move to an area where there is habitat?
Even if they didn't move, you're on the right track.
Because all the different species are diverse over the entire habitat.
Because they're already there. You're not losing species because most of those species were spread out along all of the habitat area. You lose half the kelp forest, guess what? There's still urchins left in the remaining kelp. And if you lose half the kelp forest, there's still sea otters left, and there's still abalone, and there's still lobsters and blue crabs and red crabs and white sea bass and black sea bass and all the other stuff. This is a surprisingly complicated issue when we get to the extremes, and so I have to make sure that we're all on the same page. Let's imagine that there are 10 clumps of kelp in the Santa Barbara coastline. Some of you spend a lot of time in the ocean. You know these species really, really quick. Ready, set. What lives out there?
Kelp.
Yes.
Fish.
Yes. 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 Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Eel.
Yes.
Shark.
Sea urchin. Yes. Sharks. Yes. Yes. Your mom.
Starfish.
I think you guys understand that urchins and sea stars and sand dollars and little fish and big fish and blue fish and red fish and white fish and black fish, one fish and two fish,
And the red fish and fish.
they live all over. Hold on. They live all over that kelp forest. So when you've lost half the kelp habitat, those species are still represented. You might have lost half the starfish, but the species still exists because it's left in the other kelp, right? And so this is a really critical issue. At the first instance of humans destroying habitat, nothing happens. At the dawn of the industrial age, when air pollution started to kill off forests, biodiversity didn't go down. Because, okay, we've lost 10% of the forest, every single individual in the forest, every individual species in the forest still has a place to live. They either move, or they're already represented there. Right? Look at the opposite extreme, though. Look at the curve. You can see it stays really flat when you first lose habitat. Right here, as you lose 10, 20, 30, 40, 50%, not a big deal for global diversity. Because most of those species are still found in the remaining bits of habitat. But watch what happens when you're at this point. When you're down to your last 10%, the last clump of kelp, that's really valuable for diversity. As habitat becomes more rare, the impact on diversity becomes greater. No. Beep, beep. As habitat becomes more rare, the impact on diversity is greater.
Why?
Because you're on the steep part of the curve.
Yeah, but
Because that last bit of habitat is your final reservoir for diversity. When you lose the first 9 clumps of kelp, you've got almost all the species left, so biodiversity is the same.
when you start.
But when you lose that one, that's the loss of diversity. Today, please look up. We're over here now. We've got what? 10% of our old growth forest, 6% of our chaparral, less than 10% of our deciduous temperate forest, temperate deciduous forest. We're reaching this spot in a lot of our habitats. When you give up the first tree in the forest, biodiversity doesn't go down. Who cares? Everything that lived in that tree still has an individual in some other tree. Who cares? But when you're down to the last tree, and that one goes down, that's when biodiversity is really hammered. You have to realize that the value of habitat depends on the scarcity of habitat. It's called species area effect. I know that's complicated. Luckily for you, I can repeat all of that when you watch the video at home. But trust me, that's one of those central issues. This is like a really big whoop. When you go to university, you can do like weeks and weeks on this issue. The data is very robust. I used to do a lab where students made this curve. In many of our habitats, we're over on that steep part on the right. Nowadays, we really can't keep logging in some forest. We really can't keep farming in some grasslands. We really can't keep fishing in some parts of the ocean because they are the final reservoirs of diversity. They're the last chance. There's so many species. Yeah.
Why 10% of habitat left, if you have 10% left, is the species diversity lower than when you were at 0% habitat left? Is it strictly a space issue?
Yeah, I mean, there is the fluke possibility that in that first 10% that did include a species entirely.
Okay.
It could happen that in that corner of the forest there was one salamander that didn't occur anywhere else, and when we lost that corner, you could lose a species. But it's mostly flat on the left and very steep on the right. All right, now comes the rest. How many of you with invasive species are the primary threat? Secondary threat? 4 people. How many of you with pollution as the primary threat or secondary threat? 3 or 4 people. How many of you with poaching, which is illegal hunting, as the primary threat? Because you chose mammals, almost everything you have your hand up for is either a rug or a jacket. Right?
Secondary.
You got rugs? Oh, keychains and chess pieces. Rugs? Rugs? Which one? Rugs? Oh, keychains and stuff?
Lots of stuff.
Okay.
Rugs and walnuts.
Rugs. Coats. Food. Oh, food. That's a nice one. O is over harvesting, and that's illegal. Too much legal. Which one do you have? Ivory. Yeah, keychain. How many of you have ivory?
What the ivory keychain? What?
No. How many of you did a species that's going down for its ivory? What was your species? Asian elephant? African elephant? Anybody else? Alright. So, no, rhinosaurs, narwhals.
Walruses.
Alright, now I gotta warn you, we are wasting some time. You're all looking at one overhead. You'll notice something, and the irony is extra sweet. HIPPO spells hippo. Ironically itself, an endangered species.
Lol.
What about like the
Tell me about your species. I don't know where that fits.
It's the golden.
So that's probably a pollution thing, because that disease is affected by things that we have changed.
Well, it's like a disease that only happens in
Right, and so we believe that one, what is it, the nick?
No, it's like CHYTRI.
Oh,
It's a
chytrid.
long-
Chytrid, the chytrid
It's really
virus.
long. It's like cello.
Is your frog
It's
from
tall.
Whatever. A, hold on. A,
Your frog from Colombia?
hold on. A, can I answer this question, please? A, that could be just a natural risk. And sometimes species go down for natural reasons. But B, it may be more susceptible to that disease because of pollution in the water. Don't forget that amphibians breathe through their skin as well as their lungs. And so because of water pollution, amphibians everywhere are more susceptible to illness because their mucous membranes are affected. All right. I want to remind you that you live in an era of growing bush meat trade. So more and more people eat stuff out of the trees. A lot of my students are like, Oh my god, that doesn't make any sense. How could that go extinct? I've never seen it at Ralph's. Let me remind you, we're not worried about the stuff that's showing up in your Ralph's. Because it shows up at your Ralph's, some other folks might not have food to eat, so they eat the stuff in the trees. So the bush meat trade is either legal or unregulated hunting for food. And how many of you have a threat that is either legal or unregulated hunting for food? Surprisingly common. All right. These are called the anthropogenic extinction rate, HIPPO. Habitat invasives, poaching, pollution, and overharvesting. Anthropogenic means born of humans or caused by humans. And it's somewhere between 100 and 1,000 times the background rate of extinction. It really depends who you ask. These numbers are very difficult to nail down. We're trying to talk about a glacial process, but we've only done the data for a couple decades. So it's really hard to get a fair number. I don't want to be alarmist and say it's 1 billion times, but it might be higher than 1,000 times the background rate. And so because we are at such an extreme rate of extinction, we are the 6th mass extinction. Please look up on the map wall. See, we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and look at the very end. Whoop, that's us. I think it goes volcano, meteor, meteor, volcano, meteor, humans.
So sad.
Maybe it's sad. Maybe it's cool. I don't know. We'll get to that. Now look, I know that many of you have little things you'd like to discuss, and I want to be here for that. But we got to get to the part that the College Board always wants you to ask, or always wants you to answer, about which are the species that are going down the drain. Because there are some really obvious patterns. For example, raise your hand if your endangered species is the size of a house cat or larger. It's not a coincidence. Remember that almost all the species on Earth are smaller than a house cat. But being bigger means you're more susceptible. Larger habitats, depending on more volumes of productivity. Slow reproduction, long lifespans, means more time for things to go wrong. Bigger space between babies means you got to get lucky for many, many, many years before you actually get lucky and make a baby. Get it? Two different kinds of lucky. Don't you think?
Oh. I forgot. Oh. Yeah, I remember. Since big species are more likely to go extinct in the near future habitat, does that mean if there's a mass extinction, phytoplankton and zooplankton
Yes.
kind of recreate everything?
What does the word say that curls up?
Productivity.
Productivity?
Remember also, being useful to humans is an immediate death sentence. If we could make a rug out of you, you're doomed. You know who's doing perfectly fine on this planet? The stuff that's useless to us. Like rays, they've taken over the bottom of the ocean. Jellyfish. Some parts of the world have 600 times more jellyfish than they did 400 years ago. I mean, think about it. The jellyfish are just swimming across the ocean, talking to each other like, hey, do you notice there's like no fish around?
What is jellyfish?
Not much.
What is jellyfish?
Whatever they want. There's jellyfish that eat plankton and jellyfish that eat small fish. Yes, turtles eat jellyfish, and fish compete with jellyfish, but we got rid of all the turtles. We've made what, like drums and things to put on the wall and egg soup out of them or something. And we caught them all by accident with fishing, and then we got rid of all their competitors because we eat all their competitors. So thank God the jellyfish is useless to humans, and they are owning it. If we could figure out how to eat rays, it would be a multi-billion-dollar fishery, because all that stuff that's falling through the oceans is making ray populations explode too.
So, like, the primary reason for a lot of the species going extinct is us. What will our reason for extinction be, like the human species?
My money's on disease.
On disease?
Yeah, but different people talk about it, and I love that conversation, but I gotta hustle.
Okay, well, like human-created disease?
In short answer, kinda.
Okay.
Human exacerbated disease.
Okay.
Look, being super sensitive sucks, being specialized sucks, being migratory really sucks because you need a lot of habitats to be intact. What are the chances of that? And of course, you know that genetic isolation is like the final death sentence. You know, big species with a lot of numbers are fine, but as soon as the numbers start to drop, then the genetic risk becomes the final problem. So usually, all of these will lead to that one. So big, because they need a lot of habitat and productivity, they reproduce slowly, they have a long span between generations, and that long life is a long time for things to go wrong. Number two, being useful to humans. If we can eat it, or we can wear it, or we can make keychains out of it, or we can throw it at each other, it's doomed. Being very sensitive sucks. Imagine all the stuff that breathes in water, or breathes in water. That's where we put all of our garbage, because obviously the rain falls and washes away all of our different types of pollution. So God forbid you live in water. Imagine if you need quiet or darkness. Like, what's left for you? Being specialized sucks because you've put all your eggs in one basket, so to speak. Evolutionarily, the specialists, they don't survive change, and we are the biggest change in the history of life. Migration sucks because you need more places, and eventually genetic isolation really, really, really is the straw that breaks the camel's back. And so now the interesting question is, who's left? Who shoots the gap? Who comes out of the barrel and goes, wow, that extinction event was gnarly, but I'll be fine?
Jellyfish?
Jellyfish, that's for damn sure.
Rays.
Rays.
Cockroach, Republican. Sabertooth.
You know, the opposite of what I just said. Look, the opposite. Smaller, generalist, useless to us, things that are globally distributed, things that are really tough, what we call weeds and pests, they'll be fine. I mean, like the cockroach. Sure. You may have heard of these things called relic species. You know, like crocodiles and sharks, they've been around forever. Centipedes. First they were small, then they were giant, then they were small, but they've always been around. Roly-polies, the novelists. There's a few things that have been around for a really long time, and they match. You know, they're smaller, generalist, calm, and hardy, so they'll be fine. Unless we find a way to make them into soup or pelts, some things will survive all sorts of extinctions. Sharks go way back. Crocodiles go way back. Unless they have some sort of a use to humanity, the weeds and the pests will always come out of the barrel. And that's what I want to talk about last. Is what happens in the long term, because there's a really interesting pattern that arises. It's a fascinating field. It's called macroevolution, which is not organismal or single species evolution. That's called microevolution. I want to talk about macroevolution. Like, what are the patterns in the history of life? This poster. What happens with, like, groups of organisms over long stretches? The big picture of evolution. It's called macroevolutionary biology. It's a great field. By the way, UCSB has some of the most brilliant minds in that discipline. I had the honor of eating lunch with them most of my college career, and it was spectacular and totally blew my mind. So in the beginning, there was, I don't know, protoplasm or aliens or space rocks, pop rocks, some. But you understand. Don't laugh. No laughing. This is school. No fun. No fun.
Let's straighten my ear.
I'm only going to get fired. That's on the internet now. In the beginning, there were, less numbers of species. This is the number of species. And you also understand that in periods of stability, evolution is inevitable because competitors lose and those who compete the less win. And so species split. You've heard this. It's called specialization. And as we've discussed before, specialization pretty much will split niches until they get specialized enough that there's really no space for more species given the amount of productivity. Once you've reached that magic number of species across your landscape, usually rates of speciation stay very, very low. Until a volcano goes off and kills almost everyone. Or a meteor strikes and the climate changes temperature really quick and everybody dies, except for a couple. You'll notice a couple of species shock the gap. A couple of them survive. Maybe they live in a part of the ocean where they weren't affected, or they live underground, or they live in, I don't know, blah, 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 blah. A couple will make it. And just like the age of the dinosaurs was followed by the age of the mammals and birds, at every one of these mass extinctions, some single species went through the die-off and spawned a whole spectrum of new species. You might notice a pattern that extinction and speciation are punctuated. They are sudden. If you look at the fossil record, there are hundreds of millions of years with just a few extinctions and just a few new species, and then, pow! Over 10 million, thousands of species go down and thousands of species come up. It's pretty amazing. When you look through the fossil record, there are these critical turning points. Punctuation. Remember that there's still a background rate. Some occasional extinctions and occasional new species happening in the middle. But it's called punctuated equilibrium. That the net number of species, the net number of niches, is usually the same before as it is after those shuffling of the cards. Meteor strikes, wipes out the dinosaurs, all these niches are left open, a couple of mice survive because they're warm-blooded and they live on the forest floor, and those couple of mice, they give rise to thousands of mammal species. Because niches are open. And by specializing on those niches, the mammals don't have to compete with each other. Imagine if we change something in Santa Barbara and all the businesses move out all of a sudden, but all the customers are still here, you're going to get a whole bunch of new businesses right afterward, right? Think about it. Everybody in Santa Barbara stays, but we close all the businesses. Obvious opportunity to start a whole bunch of new businesses, right? Evolution does the same thing. It's called punctuated equilibrium, where the number of niches and the number of species before a mass extinction is usually the same as the number of species and the number of niches after a mass extinction. It's not consistent. It's not a steady change. There's a little rollover in businesses, but most of the change happens with a punctuated extinction or a brief period of speciation. Right after all the dinosaurs died, most of the mammals were born. I don't mean right after 15 minutes. I mean right after a period of 5 million years or so. But 5 million years after the meteor, we had more mammal species than in the 60 million years since. Okay.
Are species getting more and more adapted to deal with extinction? And
No, because extinction is, first of all, a constant. Second of all, you can't get used to dying. And species are always evolving, so they're always changing. They're always adjusting to changes in the environment. The environment's always changing, but you don't really get used to extinction, no.
But the ones who survived the first extinction, wouldn't they be more capable of surviving?
Oh, well, the generalists came from generalists, which came from generalists. Absolutely, they're the ones that make it. So that's an interesting question. Please look up. Yeah, I want to take this all the way to the bell. This is one of my favorite lectures of the year. And we only got a couple minutes. Let me finish. Almost done. Me. 50% of today's species will be gone by 2100. Some of you could survive that long. Advances in medicine, whatever. I always wonder who's going to shoot the gap of the Holocene extinction. Who's going to come out of this barrel? You know, it's not likely that humans will. We're big. We require a lot of land area. We're generalists, but we have a long lifetime. We have a long spacing between babies. We've got most of the qualities that say we're going to go extinct.
40.
Please stop riding the brakes, bro. I'm trying to teach. Look, it follows to reason that humans could make it 100 or 200 years more, but probably not 1,000 or 2,000 more. Think of what's happened in the last 2,000. If we're going to make it 3,000, I'm sure it won't be 5. And in the geological time scale, that's nothing. It's a blip, blink of the eye. Humans are right around the end. You know, it's not that tragic. Big species don't last that long. It was bound to happen sooner or later. All things born will die. So our species has had some really good times, but we can't last forever. Yeah, wait. Hold on. I'm almost done. And on our way down, we're going to drag down about half the planet's diversity, it seems. And so I really wonder, like the jellyfish and the cockroaches, you know, like giant terrestrial jellyfish slithering across the land. Flying cockroaches, and flying jellyfish, and flying rayfish or something?
Cockroaches can fly.
Okay, fine. Oh! It's over!
Cockroaches with legs.
I really wonder where we're going. You know, in the long term, I'm not worried. Remember, life with a capital L is fine. Don't save the planet. The planet's fine. Like in a couple of 100 million years, nobody will know we happened. Couple of 100 million years, there goes all the radiation, there goes all the plastic, who cares? And in the really, really, really long term, we're getting sucked into the sun.
We're going to turn into a red giant.
But listen, you wasted my time. Give me 1 more minute. 1 more minute. I'm not worried about the distant descendants of my children. I wonder what kind of world they're going to get. Like, I've had a really good life. There are fish I've seen that my children will never see. Birds I've seen that they'll never see. Like, I think that's the real tragedy, is the short term. How quickly are we dragging everything down? Bye.